Bricks and Minifigs is your one-stop shop for all things LEGO. Hit the link below to find a store near you.
Hi, I'm William Tochik, and this is my Black Falcon Fortress mock. So starting off, we have a water pump here that pumps water down the river and into the pond, and it occasionally will leak out the sides, but it leaks enough, just enough, that the river can fully fill up, and so does the pond.
So it creates a flow, and this is all real water running through the build here.
Yes, this is real water.
So that's incredible. We can start then with kind of this section down here because I love how you've done kind of the internal areas. So what is the story kind of happening here?
Okay, so there's a castle underneath the Black Falcon Fortress, and this is sort of like their secret castle where they've got lots of like markets, and this is where most of the citizens live. And then up above we have the actual castle that's visible to all like the outsiders, and you can see that I try to theme this off the original Black Falcon's fortress set, and then I also used aspects of the Lion Knight's castle to make this upper bit.
So what are some of your favorite kind of architectural details and the design choices you made here in the castle?
Well, in the original set there are yellow and black houses, and I try to theme that there by adding two houses there, and I really think that adds a little pop of color to the build. And then also I really like these side stones that I put on the build, and those really help like make it look less blocky, and they kind of help to add texture.
Yeah, anything you can do to kind of break up the sort of big gray wall syndrome that can happen with castles is always good. So this is some great details.
And then I also tried to angle it as much as I could to give it sort of more of a not just a block feel, and try to make it more like dynamic.
So that brings us out to kind of in front of the mountain here, and you've got some great rock work that leads us down into the river portion. Lots of trees down here. So what did you do kind of in this area with the landscaping?
Okay, well, the trees have gone through a lot because we've taken this to several shows, and they get messed up every time in transit, but we try to repair them every time as best as we can. And we wanted to try to create a jungle outside of sort of the mountain area, and we wanted it to look more like medieval, and we wanted to have maybe some shorter trees so it didn't cover up the castle as much. And then we also wanted to have sort of a village portion. So I added a windmill, and then I also added a small church beside the windmill. And those kind of break up the trees a bit more, and they also kind of emphasize the pond.
And there's elements of light and movement in here, so how did you include those different elements?
Okay, so the movement I added with a motor that is inside of the house of the windmill. It was difficult because the house is so small, and we had to like try to compact it in there. But then we also have the church, and we just used a couple strips of fairy lights and put them in the top of the church. And then we just have a remote to turn it on, so that's a lot easier than the windmill motor.
And one thing that's really cool with the real water in the river is there's kind of a flow to it. So if you take one of the fish, you can actually see it go through the whole river, right?
Yeah. We occasionally do fish races with the fish and try to race, and you can pick which fish you want to win and maybe place a couple of friendly bets if you want.
So if you put this in the back here where the pump is,
then the fish will flow all the way down the river.
We'll come back out around to the front. You can see it emerge from the rock there, and it's racing through.
And then hopefully it should get to the end of the pond. And sometimes the fish get stuck on the rocks, and then the people are like, ah! It's definitely fun.
So obviously including real water is very unusual with LEGO builds, and you have to build in different ways. So where did you kind of start with planning this whole build, knowing that you were going to incorporate that water into it?
Well, at first we had this build with just a river of tiles. We didn't actually have water. But then after going to Brickworld Chicago 1 year before, my father was like, well, nobody has builds of water here. So he challenged me to build sort of like a stream running through that had actual water. And the first challenge, of course, was to get it up into the river, because I didn't want to just use a normal like pump from like any hardware store. We wanted to make an actual Lego pump. So we used several paddles in the pump, inside the pump, turned by a motor really fast to pick up the water and push it out the end of the pump.
Yeah.
And then another thing that we really had to worry about was the leaking of the build, because as you know, Lego is not watertight, So we had to make sure that we could, from all sides, catch the water, and that's where this tub comes in. We weren't able to find any Tupperwares this big, so we had to sort of make our own. So we just took some plexiglass and melted it together.
Now, how many hours have you had this running now, and does the water kind of affect the parts in any way that makes them break down?
Wouldn't say it affects the parts in any way, except for makes them a bit, dirty, because the water isn't all that clean. But we've had this running for probably 6-7 hours now, and it seems to run pretty well. Occasionally we have to switch out the motor to make sure it doesn't burn out or anything like that, but it runs pretty well.
Yeah. So when you bring this to the show, does it travel all as just one piece kind of inside this case, or how do you transport this?
Okay, so there's 3 main sections. 4 main sections. We separate the top of the castle. This can slide off of the mountain. And then we also have the mountain. And then we use Mills plate system so that we can take apart each plate separate. So these 2 plates are what we call the mountain chunk. The next 2 plates are the forest chunk. And then the last plate is the lake chunk. So we can separate that all and put it into separate boxes. And then it usually transports pretty well, so.
Yeah. Do you have plans to incorporate real water into other builds in the future? What have you kind of learned from this that you hope to be able to use in the future?
Well, definitely I want to make future builds with water, because if we ever do tear this one down, we still have this giant plexiglass tub. So we got to make a usage of that. And I'm thinking, learning about this, we could possibly create builds where the water falls and we could make a waterfall. We've definitely learned that it's difficult to pump water up with just Lego. So we're going to have to research ways that we can make the pump stronger and pump more water, and especially to make it go higher. Yep. And then we've also learned that if we ever need to make any more water builds, you want to have a Tupperware that covers the whole thing, because otherwise it could spill out of the sides and then you'd get water all over the table.
Now, you've got great minifig scenes kind of happening throughout here. So around the castle here, what are some of the minifigs you've included in that catapult over there?
We've got minifigs around the build, and each of these have their own like little scenes and stuff, just to add a little bit of humor to the build. And then that catapult there that you mentioned, it can work if you load a little 1x1 round into it. But I was tasked to make that by Blocks Magazine, which I'm currently making small builds, and then they get sent over to the magazine and then published. So
that's awesome. So what all have you experimented with in the river in terms of like running fish and various pieces through? What are some of the things that you've kind of tried out there, including in the river?
We've tried to include some way to make it look like it's really flowing, because sometimes it's hard for people to walk past because it doesn't really look like it's flowing. So we've tried to make fish stuck on there, like with that fishing rod, to sort of show that there's a bit of movement. And then we've also tried to add little bits of like green cloth to simulate algae. But so far we're still experimenting, and we hope we find something that really works and displays that the water's really moving.
What are some of the details in the church here? Because I like how you've done some of the stained glass window elements, but there's lots of great stuff happening there.
Well, I've tried to include some stained glass windows because, all the medieval churches have those. And I also wanted to try to add some architectural bits to the church to make it look more churchy, I guess. Mm-hmm. So that it can have, because, churches have all that architecture. And whenever you go see a really famous church, the architecture is just mind-blowing, so.
What did you do for the rock work on kind of the front of the cliff face? What types of elements did you find worked well there?
Well, we needed to build up, and to build up fast, you need to use burps, big ugly rock pieces. So we have a base of those, and then we wanted to make it look sort of not completely ugly. So we added some slopes and slope pieces to there, and some leaves too, to make it, look more like a mountain and less like a stack of bricks.
Fantastic work here. It's really cool to see you including real water in a build, and then just a great kind of medieval layout in general here. So looking forward to seeing more of your work in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.